Well, you know how one thing leads to another. I was doing this brake job, and there's a problem I've been having getting grease in the bottom fitting of my kingpin. And the grease fitting is over here on this side. And for whatever reason, I don't know if I got when I did the job, if I didn't get the bushing in there straight or what happened. It doesn't seem to be aligned with the hole. So we're going to take it apart. And to do that, you take everything off. You take the brake shoes off, the pins, the S-cam, the air chamber, which is over here, just kind of propped up. It comes off with a big bolt. You have to use a pretty big impact wrench to get that off of there. You can't really separate the arm from the knuckle because it's just on there really good. But to get the tie rod off, and this is just a mechanic's trick that probably most people know, when the tie rod's on here, you strike it with a hammer on this conical shape shaft that goes in there, and eventually it'll just pop out. I always keep the nut on so it doesn't fall to the floor, and turn it upside down in case I should hit the threads with a hammer and damage them, so I don't want to do that. So I keep the nut on, turn it upside down, and put it back on. And then when it drops down, it only drops down about ½ an inch. So that's where we are right now. We're going to try to get the kingpin out, and I'll show you how that's done here in a minute. Alright, so this is a kingpin puller. It's a press actually, and it's sort of like a porta pack. You have a hand pump that hooks onto the fitting right here, and then it presses the rod down. It goes all the way through the bottom, presses the kingpin through. Anyway, it is a bear to get on there. I borrowed the tool, and I'm glad to be able to have an opportunity to do that. So anyway, that's how it's set up. Well, I'm really sorry I forgot to turn the recorder on when I did this, because what happens is when you connect the pump through the line to the jack or to the press, you get it all set up, all tightened up and ready to go. You start cranking down on it, you do it slowly, and when that thing lets go, it is one heck of a bang. And so I meant to record that, and I forgot to turn the camera on. So this is the end of the axle with the kingpin out, and the kingpin is down here on the floor. And the issue was, and the reason I'm doing this is because these bushings that are inside allow you to change them without, when the kingpin wears out, and you can rebush it so that you can get the play out of your steering knuckle. So this hole here for the grease fitting is supposed to line up with a hole that's down inside the bushing. And apparently when I put that together the last time, I put it together upside down. And so the hole doesn't line up and the grease won't go in. Now, for whatever reason, originally the grease started going in, and I guess when the thing got a little bit of wear on it or whatever, it quit. And I wasn't able to grease it. So that's what we're doing. We're going to try to push that out and turn it around, put it back in the right way, hopefully without damaging it, because they are hard to get. So how do we do that, you ask? Well, here's what we do. This is a socket that's in the top of well, it's upside down now, so it's the bottom, but actually it looks like it's on the top of the steering knuckle. And this is another socket that's bigger, and so when we compress this, it's an all thread. It's a homemade tool, with a bunch of washers on the end. When we screw that down, the upper socket will push the sleeve into the lower socket, which is larger, and hopefully we won't damage it when we do that. So I spent practically an entire afternoon trying to clean up this spindle, and you can see, it's still got a little bit of stuff on it here and there, but you can't do a good job unless you have it clean, because every time you try to touch something, it gets grease and dirt on it, and you're trying to drive in a bushing like this bushing right here, it just gets dirty and contaminated, and then it won't slide easily, and it doesn't do a good job. Now, we reused the old bushing. I told you I took that one out, took it out, cleaned it, took it out, cleaned it up, realized that I had it in backwards. It wasn't aligning with the hole for the grease fitting. And this is the top one. The top one was in fine. You can see in there the hole for the grease fitting in the housing, and that lines up with the slot in the bushing. And on the top, you have this ring on the outside that's supposed to minimize the amount of grease that comes up into the cap where the nut is. On the bottom, it's the same thing. You put the ring on the bottom to keep the grease from going out the bottom, and the channels on that end direct straight up to the end, and they allow grease to come up, which will then grease the thrust bearing that normally sits right here. And so the grease on the top goes down and greases the washers that fit into the shims that you put in to space it out so there's no play. And the grease on the bottom comes up and greases the kingpin, and then comes up and greases the thrust bearing. So I'll show you how this works here in a second. I have it in. I started out, I set it in there. I put a 2x4 block. I simply took a wooden hammer and slid it through to get it lined up. It was a little bit easier to get it lined up like that with this block in here. You can see the block has a few marks on it because I beat it down there pretty good. The good part about this is a wooden block is not going to damage the bushing. So you don't want to use anything that's really, really hard when you're striking it, unless you have the right tool and you're positive that the right tool is going to line it up. But it's much more civil to pull it in with a wrench, and I'll show you that going in here in a second. All right, so basically at this stage of the game, this thing's pretty much going to just slide in here straight like this. You can see it. This is the bushing going in. And we're not hitting anything or beating on anything, so it's kind of a nice, easy process. And this is, again, a homemade tool. It's just an all thread and a bunch of washers. And I've used it for all kinds of things, putting in bearings and pickup trucks and all kinds of stuff. It's a really handy little tool to use to get the job done. And I think that that's just about it. And now you'll see, and also you'll notice that it was lined up at the top hole for the top bushing, and when it's in the middle there and you're fairly well centered here, you know you're pretty much in the right spot. So now you can see that it's right where we want it to be. And let's see, does our hole line up? Yep, you can see right down inside there, the grease fitting hole lines up with a slot in the bushing, and we're good to go. Now, one more thing that I should mention is that when you buy these things new and you go to put one of these pins, and this pin is warm right now because I had it in the house, I was cleaning it up, and it's warm, and this thing has been out in the garage for a long time, so it's not sliding in there very easily until it cools down. But one thing I should mention is that when you buy these bushings new to put in here, they're much larger than they need to be they're much thicker than they need to be for these pins, even when you buy them new. And there's a tool that you can use that reams them out, a reamer, and you do it gently until you get it to just the right size where it'll fit in but not have any play. And you know, you can do that with like a honing tool or something like that, but it takes forever to do it with a honing tool, and if you have the reamer, it's much quicker. But they won't go together brand new without reaming them, and so beware of that if you're planning on doing this job. So about ready to wrap up here. I'll just give you a couple of final pointers on this. We have everything assembled. We don't have the arm on, so it still turns pretty easily without it. We'll hook up the tie rod here in a bit, and we don't have the brake chamber hooked on either yet. But the kingpin is in, the cap is on, and everything's good. We got our new bushings in. Well, I got our bushing turned around and put them back in. So this is what the pin looks like that goes in there. It's conical shaped between the top and the bottom, and it has once you slide it up, you have a sleeve that goes in over top of the top that makes the top and the bottom the same size. And then what I took out of there originally a number of years ago were these plastic or fiber, some sort of non-metallic bushings that were in there that were worn out, and they slide over, both ends. I don't know whether you have to, if you can get those in different sizes and trim them or what. But what we have is we have our fitting in, filled it with grease, and the grease is starting to push out down here at the bottom of the throwout bearing. So you know that the grease is getting up to the throwout bearing, which is what we were having a problem with before. And then on the top, on the other side, you can see grease squeezing out between the shims. Now to get this on here, what I did, it's a little hard to do by yourself, but you can do it, is I dropped a socket, ratchet with a socket on it down through here so it wouldn't fall through. And I simply lifted this up, set it on there, put the socket through, and then I worked from the bottom and I pushed the pin up to this point, and that held the bottom end, not tight, but tight enough so that I could then push up with this on a jack, with a push up on the bottom of the knuckle with a jack and tighten this space up in here, while it allowed me to slide these bushings in. I had to pull the socket out, obviously, the ratchet, and slide those in and get it tight. So now there's no up and down movement, and that's basically all there is to it. So now you know how to do kingpins. Good luck. Write to me if you have questions.